Highways are part of the mythology of this country. For many years, the American imagination has associated them with this idea of connection, new access to the world beyond your doorstep. This idea of freedom to pick up and hit the road, venture north, south, east, or west. No surprise that there's a whole genre of films dedicated to them, and countless songs about how they're what life is, how you can get your kicks there, the act of heading out onto them, their ability to take you to the danger zone or even to hell. You, even you, could be the king of the road. But like many American myths, this one doesn't tell the whole story at all. In every major American city, highways divide, often on purpose. Time passes and they start to crumble. And as the ways we get around evolve in our changing world, they begin to feel less modern, less dreamy, and maybe even a little obsolete. So these days, American cities have been asking themselves, what exactly do we do with these old highways? American cities like Portland, Oregon. From the Gert Boyle Studio, I'm Jen Chavez, and this is The Evergreen, a podcast from OPB about the place you call home. Today, how Portland is attempting to solve this puzzle and undo some of the harms of the past, whether that means tearing down a highway and putting in a park, or reuniting a community that highway construction tore apart. Not long ago, host Ian Coss from The Big Dig came to town. The Peabody-winning podcast from WGBH explores Boston's controversial effort to bury a downtown highway. For a live conversation in front of an audience at the Literary Arts Bookstore in Portland, he was joined by OPB's Weekend Edition host, Stop Requested creator, and regional transportation queen, Lillian Kerr-Bake, along with special guests who have lived and breathed this issue, from Harbor Drive to I-5.
So every city has a version of the same problem that Boston had, which is a highway right through the middle of it. And most cities are not, chomping at the bit to, do open heart surgery on their downtown for 16 years and spend a fortune. So we're going to look at, what some other cities are up to. And I'm very excited to be here in Portland, because Portland, I didn't know this before we started planning this event, has the distinction of the original highway teardown, the original highway removal. Give it up, right?
I think this crowd is more excited about tearing down highways than probably most crowds.
Before the Embarcadero, right? Before the Big Dig, was even a glimmer in anybody's eye, They were doing it here. So to get into this history, we've got with us
Sean Granton, who I don't know how to introduce Sean because Sean is such an iterate volunteer in so many different organizations in Portland. But we brought Sean because in his free time, he spends time going to the Oregon Historical Society, looking up records from things gone past in Portland, and leads the Dead Freeways bike ride, which I had to... Ian is not from Portland, and so the concept of a bike ride where people learn about dead highways was confusing to him. So I'm going to let him explain this to the audience that might not get why that's a thing.
I mean, I should say this is right in my Venn diagram of biking and dead highways. This is right up my alley. So, Sean, for somebody who has never heard of such a thing, what is a Dead Freeways bike ride?
Well, it's a tour that we look at the highways and freeways and what have you that either didn't make it, that were like sold as a sure thing and were put dotted lines on maps for years and then just didn't happen. Or in the case of the Mount Hood Freeway, in the case of the Mount Hood Freeway, that was the case. But on Harbor Drive, where we did have a highway downtown that we got rid of. So we removed it. And that's where you're talking about before the Embarcadero. And we didn't need an earthquake to remove that one. We just decided to. Sorry, San Francisco.
So, could you give me a little highlight reel of what some of your favorite spots along the Highways ride?
Well, I think a couple of my favorite spots is along the planned route for the Mount Hood Freeway. Basically, there's not really a lot of evidence that we were ever going to build this big highway there, but there are a few little spots that basically was condemned land that ODOT, Oregon Department of Transportation at the time was the Oregon Highway Division, purchased, left fallow in the hopes of, when we're going to build the freeway here, that we already have the land cleared. And so those little parcels of land just laid fallow for decades afterwards until the neighborhoods is like, why don't we make a park out of this? And Piccolo Park, just a little south of Division, around like 28th is the big example of it. Like the reason why it's a park, and a park that's like in the middle of a block versus say like, a block or several blocks, is because it was like 4 or 5 different properties that were condemned in advance of the freeway project, and the freeway didn't happen, but nobody ever built on top of it, and they decided, let's make a park out of it.
Are there any spots? My favorite, little dead freeway spots are where there's like a little off ramp that then just dead ends in space. You got any of those?
Oh yeah, we got those.
We got one of those too.
We got those. Yeah, there is one just south of the Hawthorne Bridge. If you're coming where Southeast Clay meets First, and if you're coming from the Esplanade path, the bike path and the walking path along the east side of the Willamette River, there is a ramp. If you look up where I-5 starts to go over, become the Markham Bridge, that was going to be the interchange for the Mount Hood Freeway.
And as someone who bikes to work at 4:30 in the morning through there, I have to tell you, a very popular party spot.
Yeah.
And is it the kind of dead end where, like, if you're not careful, you could blow through a barrier and launch?
Give drivers today an opportunity. I'm sure it might happen, but generally, no.
Okay.
It shouldn't.
My favorite of those in Boston, we've got, if you look on Google Maps, like the satellite view of the interchange of 95 and 93 out on the outskirts of Boston, you can see 95 was supposed to keep going across, and it just dead ends in the woods. And you can see the concrete just like goes into the trees for a little bit, and then it just peters out.
Yeah, I grew up in Connecticut, so I'm a little bit familiar with New England, and there was definitely freeway projects that didn't ever happen. And like the classic one there is in New Haven, which was, they basically, like, unlike Piccolo Park, they cleared like several blocks in advance of this highway that was going to go to the Naugatuck Valley, and they never built it. They just built a stub connecting I-95 and I-91 and Route 34, and it just sort of literally dead-ended into the parking ramp for Yale New Haven Hospital. Like that. And it was that way from the late 50s until now. And they're just finally starting to do stuff with that land. Like it laid fallow for decades. Like it would just be like you drive down or whatever, and like 2 blocks of just cleared out land that was not being used for anything.
Wow.
And that was like, it was definitely in the era of urban renewal. So, there was a lot of impetus in a lot of cities across the United States to just tear down now, and then we're going to build eventually because we're going to get the money, and it's the future. We're going to get all this stuff. I mean, this happened here in Portland too, around Emmanuel Hospital, where we still have several blocks of land that are just cleared, and I think they're plans on starting to do something with it. I'm sure some in the audience might know anything, but I mean, that was 1973 when that happened.
Wow.
And that was in the heart of the Black community too. Like, it was just, they took it out with the plans of not highway expansion in that one, but hospital expansion that never went through. But yeah.
So what you're describing about the 1970s and the spirit and thinking of the time makes it even more wild that Portland was actually removing a downtown highway in the 1970s. So I'm wondering if you could give us a bit of the Harbor Drive story. And Lillian, maybe you can jump in or assist here too. But I guess the question I have about Harbor Drive is why is this highway? Why this highway of all highways? Why is this night different from all other nights? Basically, maybe to explain that, one of the things I took away from studying the Big Dig was that most big, ambitious ideas never happen.
Yeah.
And that, the big digs of the world are the far, far outliers that survive, 1,000 possible deaths to make it to that point. And so when I look at a project like Harbor Drive, something unusual happened there, that the status quo, was left behind.
So I think there's a few different factors that went into why Harbor Drive got removed. And let me just quickly go back to what Harbor Drive was. Basically, Harbor Drive was US 99W going through the heart of downtown, connecting to the Steel Bridge, so Interstate Avenue, and then eventually connecting to Barber Boulevard. And it was built, it was interesting because it was one of those few highways that was started before World War II. So it's like they were planning this in the 30s, and like it opened in stages a little bit before World War II. World War II put a stop to a lot of that stuff and then finally got finished. And it wasn't a very long highway. I think maybe only a couple miles at best. And it was a very remedial divided highway. I think there were I don't know if there was stoplights on it, but there was definitely left turn lanes that you had to cross traffic. It was a very outmoded highway, and a lot of these urban freeways, they build it and then it's oh, this is already over capacity and we're already seeing all the flaws in this design. So fast forward another 20-something years to the late 60s, and there was talk, especially with the highway department, because, highway departments always look at this stuff and they're well, how can we improve this? And obviously it's we're going to put some more lanes, we're going to tear some more of this and do more of that. And that was around the time, late 60s, just sort of the mood in the air of the community of people doing activist stuff in Portland, that maybe that's not the answer. Maybe we can stop this from, getting even worse than it is. Because one of the big things that Harbor Drive did was that it denied us access on the west bank of the Willamette River. If you look at old photos of the 50s and 60s, when you see all the cars going down what is now Tom McCall Waterfront Park, there was a little bit of 5-6 foot sidewalk on the waterfront side that you could theoretically walk if you really wanted to, if you wanted big cars speeding right by you.
Everybody likes a walk down by the river with, a highway next to you. It's the best possible relaxing experience.
And so it's a strip, a sidewalk with highway on one side and river on the other.
Yeah, exactly. It was our seawall. So there's a little bit of, they built the seawall in, I think, between the 20s and 40s, and so that was the remnant of the promenade that they had for that. And so the idea in the air came up. It was what if what if we can go just promenade down by the river, without 6 lanes of speeding traffic going by, high speed and leaded gasoline and all that stuff of the 60s, and it just had the right balance, the right concoction of community activists, state government. We had Tom McCall as governor, and he was pretty progressive for his time, and was amenable to the idea of doing something different. Before that, most elected officials in the United States in the 50s and 60s would not say no to any freeway project, and would just look at you sideways if you suggested not building something. And then that mood in the air. And there was also a few other things coming around the corner. I-5 through downtown, or at least through the east side over here, was completed. And so it was sort of redundancy, especially eventually 405 would get finished in 73, so that you already had freeways on both sides here. Why have another one here? So there was that there. And also just this environmental acts that started in the early 70s, like the EPA and then Clean Air Act, that was, I think, earlier than that, but got really reinforced around that time. That that was a tool that a lot of activists could have in their pocket when they wanted to challenge these things that didn't exist before.
Was there pushback though? I mean, I feel now when you talk about removing a highway, it's immediately oh, but what will this do to the traffic on the other highways, and how will trucks get there? And
yeah, I mean, there was. I mean, it was. I think the big pushback came from a lot of downtown businesses, because they were just worried about access. They wanted more access. They wanted that bigger, newer, shinier Harbor Drive, and they were saying, why are you doing that? But the irony, like with all that stuff, is that they were trying to make downtown more accessible for cars, and they're never going to win against the suburban development. Like, you're not going to win against a mall. Like, if you want
to drive and park and shop, you can't beat them all.
I mean, you're going to just keep on tearing down blocks to put more parking garages and widening streets and that and like then you're not going to have a downtown anymore, and you just sort of like killed yourself just to compete with the Washington Square malls and the Clackamas Town Centers of the world, which for those of you who are in Boston are shopping malls that are in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah. And was Tom McCall, the governor, or the activist, able to make the business case that we need to envision a downtown in which it's a nice place to walk and get around without
Tom
car?
McCall was persuasive. Before he was a politician, he was a journalist and he was a news broadcaster. So he had the powers of persuasion at his disposal. And, I think he was also a smart, shrewd man in a lot of different ways that he was coming to it from like sort of that, like you had like your stereotypical hippie activists that were trying to go against this. And then he was, the serious, reserved, like politician guys.
Yeah.
So like, people, and it's unfortunate, but people listen more to when people like that say stuff rather than, some guy that's got beads in his hair and stuff and, his name Moondog. And no offense to Moondogs in the audience or anything.
I think that coalition building was also a really important part of it as well, though.
Yeah.
It was, which is, I think, what we're seeing now as we talk about solutions in the Rose Quarter as well, is that coalition building. Because one of the big things that kept coming up was like we deserve access to our water. Like our river is extremely important to the city of Portland, and it's extremely important to the people and the businesses, and we deserve as humans a right to access that water. And I think that was like, it sounds very hippy dippy, but I think it was very valuable as a coalition building platform for what is like a pretty unsexy project. Like tearing out a highway is not like, it's hard to capture the imagination, especially when we were the first people to do it, right? You couldn't be like, oh, look at these great pictures from other places that have done it. So yeah, I think that was part of it. We were doing weird stuff in the 70s and 80s too in Portland. Like we did a lot of interesting radical things when it came to city planning and transportation and zoning that no one else was doing, which has kind of, I think at this point, we now are dealing with the legacy of some of the infrastructure that we put into place. Like we have the only elected regional government in the country, and they just find new jobs for themselves. And that was very much, that resulted because they were trying to do coalition building. But one of the things that happened in the creation of that was that they excluded Vancouver, which is where all the urban growth goes from Portland, right? Yeah. So
it does. Yeah, go ahead.
And just to add another thing onto that, like they also had a lot of the activists had great optics, and one of the things that they did, and I think it was like 1969 when the conversation really got started. So like I was talking about the Esplanade, a little bit of like pavement they had between the highway and the river, and then there was like on the other side maybe like a 6 to 10 foot strip of grass between that and what is now Nato Parkway, or at the time Front Avenue. And so they had a picnic on that little strip of grass and encourage everybody, the media and all that, to come down to it. And, the idea is like, wouldn't it be nice that we could have like this picnic by the river without 6 lanes of highway between us and that? And that was a great moment that people started saying, oh yeah, like that's a good idea. Like, I mean, we're a river city and like we have no real access to the river anymore. Like it's all cut off by a freeway on one side, a freeway on the other side.
Yep.
So it sort of sparked the imagination.
It's so interesting, those moments when like the quote unquote adults in the room suddenly start paying attention and taking seriously something that had been just like a pipe dream.
Yeah.
And it seems like once that happens, there's some turning point where what was unimaginable and fringe suddenly enters the conversation. When is that moment? Is it right around the late 60s, right around 1970?
It was around that time, yeah, because it's sort of our story of like, all this going down, because at the same time the Mount Hood Freeway was, they're being proposed and then also being fought by neighborhood activists and the community in general, and that finally got stricken off the US DOT record in 75. So that was, good half decade in the very end of the 60s, early 70s when all that was going down.
So there's a sense that there is something distinctly Portland about the Harbor Drive story that other, New York has highways by the river and plenty of cities have highways by the river, but there was this confluence of a road that wasn't desperately needed.
Yeah.
And a really kind of quirky mix of activism and political engagement.
I like the term quirky for Portland. Thank
people
you.
in the right positions of power. And that kind of soup came together in the early 70s.
Yeah.
And it came together, but as I said, there was opposition. I mean, there was definitely business opposition and, trying to wrap the heads of the ODOT officials of not building something.
Mm-hmm. Well, imagine the alternative was, hey, let's get some federal money and expand this thing and, make it 8 lanes and have breakdown lanes. And
there's one thing any, Department of Transportation, they love that federal money, and especially during the era of the build out of the interstate highway system starting in 1956 is when the act went in, and it gave states the 90-10 split where the federal government would pony up 90%.
Right.
And then 10% would be state and local. And it was just and that era is you'd be stupid not to take this money and build stuff.
Right.
When are we going to have this opportunity again? Let's build all these things. And so
by removing the highway, you are giving up this huge pot of federal
Yeah.
money, jobs, contracts, all that stuff.
and especially was bigger for the Mount Hood Freeway because it was a bigger project too.
And then we gave up that project after already starting it. And then we were like, what do we do with this money? And they managed to convince the federal government that we should spend it on a light rail instead. And it tells you how cheap light rail is compared to building highways, that they didn't run out of that money when they stopped building the Mount Hood Freeway. They didn't run out of the money for the MAX system as a match until the early 2000s.
That was repurposed highway money from the 1970s that they were using to run the light rail until the 2000s.
Light rail is a cheap date. It's also a cheap date when you put it in a highway you've already built. I mean, so that's one of the things, like all of the indigenous people of this area have always used this kind of dip here, Sullivan's Gulch, as a method of transportation, right? So we have sort of this dip that goes through the east side of Portland. And
that's where we are right now?
yeah, we're very close to Sullivan's Gulch.
Yeah.
The nearest car-free bridge over it is the Blumenauer Bridge, which we just built like a couple years ago.
But the dip is right by the river.
Yes, and we put the highway in the middle of it, and they said, "Oh, let's put a light rail in it," and heavy rail is in there as well. But it turns out that makes a significant difference to the overall. I mean, I'm not going to say that light rail is the cheapest thing that you can build, but it turns out to be a lot cheaper than a highway project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My last question about, we could talk about Harbor Drive all night, I'm sure, but I'm curious, since this was done, about 50 years ago now, I took a walk along the west side of the river today, and you can see the trees are big. They're grown in. Portland has been running this post-highway removal experiment longer than any other city. So how has it borne out here in terms of the businesses, in terms of the use, what it's done for the downtown?
Well, I mean, I think it's having Waterfront Park is a bigger asset than having 6 lanes of mostly stop traffic, like running by the river. And I mean, it's definitely been a way that we've sold ourselves as a city of like what we've done, and like having a nice waterfront again. And so, I mean, that definitely helped out. And I think eventually, I mean, there's always going to be some old guy usually that would just be like, I wish they built the new Harbor Drive or Mount Hood Freeway. It would only take 10 minutes to get to Gresham. And, they lurk in comment sections everywhere. So, but I mean, I think most people can see what the benefits that we've reaped from like removing a highway or not putting in a highway. I mean, especially like Mount Hood Freeway would have been parallel to Division, and Division is a cool spot these days. I mean, it took a little while for it to become the cool spot, but it definitely is. And could you just imagine like walking down Division and then like on the south side of Division, just be looking down into a trench where 6 to 8 lanes of traffic would be, I wouldn't say speeding by because they'd probably be stopped mostly. So it would definitely be a different vibe and a different feeling. And it's like, and you look at like the neighborhoods where they did put the freeways in, like I-5 through North Portland, the Minnesota freeway. And that was a very powerful tool for the activists because at the time that people were starting to build the freeways and everything, they were just thinking of like the 1939 World's Fair Futurama and how great it was, everything was going to be. And then you put it in and you see like how the neighborhoods, the home prices depreciated in value fast, crime went up, people moved away. And then you just had this noisy, continual, highway like plowed through it that just, kept on going. And I mean, it's been healing over the years in North Portland, but it's taken it's a good long time. And like, the building of like sound barriers, which was never really included in the building of any of like freeway projects because they didn't think they needed it, or didn't care, or it was too expensive, et cetera. And then you spend millions of dollars building these things just to like hide the freeway and all that stuff. And so in the southeast Portland, where the Mount Hood freeway was going to be built, they saw what happened because that was like 10 years previous that the Minnesota freeway I-5 went through, and they're like, do we want to look like that too? And people were like, no, we do not want to look like that. And that was definitely a powerful motivator for people to stop that from happening.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Sean.
Coming up after a break, more from the Big Dig and OPB Stop Requested Live, a conversation about what to do with Portland's highways. Thanks for listening to The Evergreen, a podcast from OPB about the place you call home. If you dig what you hear, or even big dig it, subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, and we'll brighten up your Monday morning a little bit with something new and exciting to listen to each week. You can also follow OPB on Instagram at OPB Photo, or follow me directly at Jen Chavez OPB. That's Jen with 2 N's, and I'll keep you posted on what Team Evergreen is up to. And remember, this episode about the puzzle of what to do with Portland's old highways and all the great reporting and storytelling you hear on this show is made possible by the support of many thousands of OPB members. You've helped build the infrastructure that keeps us connected to one another and to you. Support our journalism by becoming an OPB sustaining member today at opb.org/pod. And now, back to the show.
So joining us now is Sharon Gary Smith and Chris Smith. Come on up.
No relation.
I would describe Chris Smith as the epitome of a citizen activist. I don't think we have enough time to list every single committee that Chris Smith has served on. There's an alphabet soup in there, but probably the highlights: Portland Streetcar, JPACT, Planning Commissioner. No More Freeways is one of the activist groups that Chris is involved with. TPAC. What other alphabet soups am I forgetting, Chris? MPAC. There we go.
So today we're on the east side of the river here in Portland. So I don't know my way around this town, but I took a walk today and I was really struck. I started over on the western side of the river in downtown, and I saw where Harbor Drive used to be, and you can walk right along the water, and there's all this open space. And then I walked up and over the bridge, one of the many bridges, and the other side of the river is so different. It's convention center, it's basketball arena, it's train tracks, it's many, many lanes of highways. I mean, the two sides of this river could not be more different.
Which one did you like walking on better?
I mean, the walking over the bridge was my favorite part. Is that like a cop-out answer?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, I do kind of get excited about all the lanes and ramps.
Now
and
we need to know
tunnels.
which bridge you walked over, though.
I went there. It was like a high one. You could walk down low or walk up high.
The Steel Bridge.
The Steel Bridge.
It's a great bridge. It's one of our only bridges that isn't operated by Multnomah County or TriMet.
All right.
So
Fun
there
fact.
you go. Fun fact.
Cross that off your bingo card.
Yep.
So basically, what I want to just set up is that we've been talking about that western side where the highway was removed, and now we're talking about the eastern side where I-5, the busiest highway on the West Coast, I believe, is still very much alive and well, depending on your point of view.
Well is an interesting definition.
Alive. So Sharon, you lived in a neighborhood called Albina. That
Exactly.
is on this side of the river, right where I-5 now runs. Can you take us back to when you were a kid in Albina, what that neighborhood looked like and how it changed in your lifetime?
I think it's significant to consider those who lived it and those who activate around it. And I'm the latter, the former, and the current activist. If you picture going down Broadway towards the Broadway Bridge, interstate, and all the way up to Williams Avenue, and then all the way up past Emmanuel Hospital, which has quite a legacy, and it's not good. That was Albina. My family's home was the entrance to the Portland Public Schools building, to give you a centering. The Memorial Coliseum, which was originally sited for downtown Portland, if you know where the Keller Auditorium is. But because of the practices and the racist policies, let me name, that's what the highway construction was really all about. And not in Portland, but in cities all across the country. That's how Black and brown communities were displaced, were dispossessed, their land, their homes were taken homes. We own my home. My parents had several. And so that area, the Moda Center, which was the Rose Quarter, that was all for the public good. That's what it says in the documents that displaced us. We were the public. So who are they talking about? And so that intentional displacement and push out to the far edges of East Portland is what decimated Albina. For those of you who don't know, Albina was called the Harlem of the West. It was the cultural heartbeat of Portland. Jazz clubs, food, restaurants, all kinds of businesses thrived in an area that was economically independent. It was looking across to the Pearl. We were right there on the river, crossing to the other side, the west side, $1 million views. So that was that deliberateness around removal and decimation of a community. I would encourage to wrap that around the activism about how we do planning and how we plan to remove people. It's still going on. Portland was considered one of the leading cities in gentrification and push out.
Yeah.
It's often called the second whitest city in the country. So it led in that process.
I was looking at some of the maps of Albina in the 40s and then going forward to today. And I think a lot of people, you might have an image of what urban renewal looks like, right? You know, maybe you take some houses and you clear some lots and you throw up a big building, you put in a highway. But this is a really extreme. This is more than just a few lots. It is
800 homes were removed.
800 homes in this whole area. It's not just the neighborhood was divided. It was truly a big chunk of houses was just erased entirely to become, as you said, these huge public goods for some other public that was not the public being removed.
Yeah, I heard talk about putting up barriers because of the sound and the noise and the emissions. Those dislocated communities, you could be sitting and looking at a barrier wall when you used to be looking across the street at neighbors. That's how perverse that whole practice was. And it was signed off on by our city government. And my family, I have the documents from Multnomah County Tax Department that says that it was to remove urban blight and for the peace and safety of citizens of Portland. So that is the history that you might not have heard or is not talked about unless it's quietly, but that's a reality that is documented around that flourishing, exciting, where families and communities were together, where folks watched you. Older folks watched us and said, you better be home before the lights go out. Where you had a sense of safety and security, as all communities want. And to do it so deliberately and to become a national model for removal. Then when you talk about urban planning, we call it urban removal. And then gentrification for folks who wouldn't come into the neighborhood unless it was for entertainment, to suddenly flood in. If you haven't gone up Williams Avenue or down Vancouver, I encourage you to see what that canyon looks like. And I'm with an organization that is community informed and led, that is repurposing, restitching, and reclaiming Albina. And that's Albina Vision Trust.
Could you talk about what the highway looks like today? So if you live in the area, if you're passing through it, how do you experience Interstate 5 in Albina?
When Interstate 5 gets close to Albina, you're talking about passing directly underneath what was Elliott School, my elementary school, is now Tubman Academy for Young Women. There are days when the teachers cannot let the students outside because the emission levels and the noxious gas is so bad that they declare it is an unsafe, environmentally unsafe day for young people whose minds and bodies are affected. And yet this has gone on for so long because it didn't matter to those in authority. To look out over a freeway going north to Vancouver, to stand in the yard in the park, Lillis Albina, next to the school, and listen to the roar of those semis, people rushing from suburbs past and through the inner city to get quickly up the road. So freeways have always been about moving people rapidly and car dependent in a place that now is identified as a significant transportation alternative city. But ODOT wanted to widen the freeway passing through Albina. So how you hold both of those at the same time is what we ask.
Yeah. I think that's a good transition to bring Chris into the conversation. So part of the reason we're talking about Albina and I-5 is that this section of highway is getting a fresh look right now.
Is it
from
fresh?
I keep really stepping in it with the
Don't you
adjectives.
think that was a very cute way to put it?
A charming, heartfelt look.
It's getting a look.
It's getting a look.
Non-threatening.
Okay, it's alive. It's getting a look. So, Chris, could you take us back? How did you first hear that Oregon Department of Transportation wanted to make some changes to I-5 in Portland?
Sure. And let me put it in the context of what I like to think of as the second generation freeway revolt. So we heard about the first generation of freeway revolts in the 70s when people got tired of running freeways through our cities. I will point out that we stopped the Mount Hood. That didn't happen until it went through a white neighborhood. Right? We have to draw that distinction. We weren't able to muster that will to keep it from going through a black neighborhood. So we stopped new freeways in cities. And the federal government basically declared the interstate system complete in the 90s, around the time the Big Dig got started. Since that time in the 90s, we have added about 75% more lane miles to the freeway network in the country. So we didn't stop, we just made the existing ones wider. And in this region, after we stopped Mount Hood, we built the 205 circumferential highway in East County. We widened 26 several times. We widened I-5 to the south of Portland, and we widened 205 not that long after we built it.
Yep.
So, the urge to add freeway lane miles has not stopped. In terms of Rose Quarter, in 2012, I was serving on the Planning Commission here in Portland, and we were looking at redoing the Central City Plan for the next 20 years. And as part of that, ODOT came to us and said, hey, while you're looking at the land use in what we call the north-northeast quadrant, we'd like to look at what we do with Rose Quarter. And that's where they proposed.
And just to define, Rose Quarter is this stretch of I-5.
It's the stretch of I-5 between the interchanges with I-405, which is the west side loop through downtown, and I-84, which is the highway that starts here and goes to Connecticut.
Got it. I know 84.
Right. That's the same 84.
So basically, the Rose Quarter stretch of I-5 is under a lot of pressure because it's receiving traffic from two other interstates,
right,
as well as carrying all the north-south traffic.
Well, and it's part of this corridor that's capped by a bridge that has need to be replaced for quite a long time.
So it's under a lot of pressure.
It's under a lot of pressure.
But it's 1.8 miles.
Got it.
And ODOT came to us and said, hey, we want to add what they call auxiliary lanes. Lanes are lanes. They accommodate more cars. The label auxiliary doesn't really mean anything. And I looked at that in the context of the whole Central City Plan and said, okay, for 20 years, the biggest investment we're going to make in Portland's Central City is a freeway expansion. This makes no sense. And that's when I cast my first no vote in 2012. It started to attract funding in 2017. And that's when I sent the infamous email to a bunch of my friends saying, who wants to get together and oppose this crazy idea? And that spawned the No More Freeways campaign.
Now, I gather that you don't support more highway lanes.
So our basic thesis is that in an age of obvious climate change, where traffic in the Portland region is 40% of our contribution to greenhouse gases, it makes no sense to keep digging the hole deeper and making the problem worse. And we spend tremendous amounts of money that we could spend on things like taking our orphan state highways that kill people on a regular basis and make them safer, where we could invest it in transit to move people sustainably, putting it into the most expensive, least efficient, most geometrically space-taking mode, single occupancy vehicles, makes no sense. Let's stop.
Lillian, I hate to do this to you, but we don't have a representative from Oregon DOT here with us.
That's a good idea.
Could you do
Sure.
your most generous steelman case for why the state wants to expand this road?
I mean,
Money.
the simple answer and the thing that you'll hear again and again from Oregon DOT is that it's a bottleneck, and they're trying to fix a bottleneck. And there's this implicit idea that if you add lanes of highway, that will fix all of our problems, because it's clearly worked every time we've done it in the past. The other part is that suddenly ODOT seems to, when it is convenient for them, say, oh, we're going to right the wrongs of the past, right? So, oh, we screwed up last time and a few other times, but this time we're going to do it right. And one of the very interesting things that Albina Vision Trust has been part of pushing for is this idea of well, one of the ways we can right the wrongs is give us the extra lanes, the auxiliary lanes, and we'll cap it. And then if you cap it, similar to, what they did with the Big Dig, is the idea that you've got this vibrant community that can be happening on top of it. And you can reconnect all of the scars that were created by the way that they broke up the communities that they went through, specifically Albina. And it seems like there is this idea that ODOT wants to say, we screwed up. we're going to not screw up this time, because if you give us enough money, we're going to do it right this time. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see them actually meet the community and come up with solutions. And one of the interesting solutions is capping the highway, right?
Yeah.
Which I see Sharon over there ready to talk, and
I
feel
was trying to have feelings for ODOT.
Did I accurately capture did anybody feel like ODOT was not appropriately represented?
I think what's important is that ODOT moves to wherever the money is. And before this, there was significant federal money for the highways. They're not operating off of popcorn, and Kool-Aid stands. Significant money. And so we had been at the table, and in fact, during Kate Brown's administration, we insisted that all the players, not just the hand-picked IODOT ones.
Kate Brown is the governor?
Kate Brown is the former governor.
Yeah.
And she convened a number of us, including community members who are not typically in these decision-making bodies. And sometimes people say, the table, we've got so many people at the table, build a new one, or change up who sits where. I'm never unaware that there's so much politic to it. But they had been meeting of necessity and to try to build support and even modify their ideas to get this done. So the more that we were engaged in, understood, and participated with them, the Albina Vision Trust, this project of rebuilding, recapturing, and rerouting Albina, we received the largest federal grant in this last administration in September, $434 million in little old Portland, Oregon, and included was money for the covers, which are not unusual. If you've ever driven in Seattle and going up I-5, you pass under the convention center where a park and all was established 20, 30 years ago.
Yep.
All over the country, you make use of the land up, and the community is empowered to be able to move, to get past the barriers. ODOT insisted it'd be too expensive when expenses have never been a problem before. And so that money, of course, was grabbed back recently because it has an equity feel to it, I think was the explanation. But the fact that they sat down of necessity and we began to figure out freeway is gonna happen, freeways are there. So our approach is, how do we bring pragmatism and a thought about recrafting, rebuilding, and creating the best scenario for those who've been harmed the most, therefore everyone will benefit. And that's the Albina Vision dream that is being actualized.
I'm really curious from your perspective, like your community was not consulted when they put I-5 through it last time.
Of course not.
And this time they proactively brought you to the very large, ever-expanding table of people that they consulted. When you heard about the idea of a highway cap, was it coming from ODOT? Was it coming from the FHWA? Or was it coming from you and you're like, hey, other places have this, why
Yes.
can't we have it?
We proposed it. It certainly wasn't
really?
a new idea with ODOT. They just wanted
they
the
had a new
maintenance
idea?
lanes. I think that he was speaking.
You're supposed
They
to be
wanted lanes
representing
for
ODOT.
maintenance. They claimed they were maintenance lane or the overage lanes, what we
Yeah,
know
yeah.
what that is. And we started talking this. They said, absolutely, it was too expensive. It could never happen.
And were you looking at other cities as examples, like you
I
mentioned
talked about Seattle and back east where I have been to cities and you've got all this activity and I realize the freeway is running under it. So not that it's the greatest scenario. We're talking about the reality of how do you better use communities and not damage them with freeways and all of the things that happen.
Yeah.
Yes. And so they but we went and got the money, hundreds of millions of dollars, which of course changed their posture. And then we got it snatched away recently, but that was for the covers.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was recently looking up some of the data on capping projects, and there's something like 25 or so that are either completed already or already ongoing in a pretty serious stage. just in the last couple decades. So it's really a trend that has caught on. And of course, the bipartisan infrastructure bill from 2021 included some funds that you were able to draw on specifically for this. So I'm curious, so did you see yourself as part of a national movement of, oh, look, this is, they're trying to do this in Austin, or they're doing this in Denver, or they're doing this in New Orleans?
I wouldn't say that I just had that bright idea one day. I was responding to the skepticism and the resistance. And when I say I and my colleagues at Albina Vision Trust, which, as I said, is the largest urban reclamation and redevelopment led by Black women in this city that had the largest national grant given to us in the previous administration. Wow. I think that's significant about Portland. Yeah. Ideas and a daring kind of, let's try that and then let's figure out if it didn't work. You've tried all this other stuff that didn't work. And so I think that's how it happened. We have brilliant folks. We have city, state, and had national relationships, which is important. And now we're going around the country being asked to talk about how we pull this off in a city with, 2 to 4% African Americans, including in the state of Oregon, and that might be some of it. Yeah. That might be some of it. We had to find partners. You talk about the Rose Quarter. We're in a new Rose Alliance partnership with the Trailblazers because they need good news. And how do we look at this area that they have a stake in? How does it become? And lastly, what I'd say is the river has always been important to my people. We came down the Columbia River onto the Willamette. When the flooding occurred in Vanport, Black people were pushed into Albina to keep them removed from other areas. And then suddenly somebody discovered river, good public transit, good access to downtown, so we were gonna take it and remove them. And that's the story of Portland, whether it's freeways or housing or any of that. Where are trees? Where are parks? That's why I appreciate talking about no more freeways, but also what we have in place. How do we change the conversation and the reality in ways that actually benefit all of us? And so that's our motivation.
What do you think actual community benefit would look like if they, like for Albina, if they were going to actually restore what was lost with a highway project, what would it look like on an everyday basis?
Well, we've just opened. September 6th was the grand opening of our first building, Albina 1, 94 units. We purchased the Paramount. If you're familiar with Broadway, there is no residential properties around there except for this brick triangular apartment that kind of juts out. We purchased that and have done common space, so a lot of elders and others. And here we are with families and all that are moving into Albina 1. You may have to cut this, but by December, we should have closed on the Portland Public Schools building. That's 10 acres for multiple use housing.
When you say closed on, you mean Albina Vision Trust is purchasing the land?
A year and a half ago, we got the Portland Public School Board to finally agree that we had first right of refusal. Since then, it has actually been codified in looking for locations for them to move from that pink elephant. So for a fact that was my family's property, and you can see all of this down Broadway and Flint. So we have the Paramount. We are in Albina 1. Mm-hmm. We are the Portland Public Schools. We have pathways and all that connect all of this, and green space will be there. That's how you rebuild. And the community has told us what they wanted and what they didn't. And the young people said $1 million views. So here I am looking across at the Pearl, looking at me, looking at them.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is people knew this. That's what the freeway was supposed to take away. So I like no more freeways.
Yeah.
But until I see something happen to I-5, we're trying to make sure that we all get involved in the process of restoring.
I wanted to ask, so Chris,
Yes.
you know, the state has this vision of expanding the road. Albina has this vision of, you know, restoring and recreating this neighborhood. What is your vision for I-5?
So I want to emphasize that, you know, at No More Freeways, we are big fans of Albina Vision Trust.
We have been
we believe
supporters.
in the project that they're on. We have a respectful disagreement about whether it's worth widening the freeway to get it capped. The way we're expressing that is, we've been through 2 rounds of environmental assessment, which is the step immediately below an EIS, an environmental impact statement. And in that, ODOT has never studied the idea of capping it without widening it. So, we have been suing ODOT for about 4 years now. We have an active federal lawsuit and active state lawsuit. And basically the goal is to get a full EIS where we can study alternatives, including tolling instead of widening, including capping without widening, including a transit alternative instead of expansion of the lanes.
I'm sure we are going to come to a place because of the circumstances now, both federally and the response of states and cities, where there's so much backtracking and we didn't mean that, and they're trying to survive. So where this goes on the list of priorities right now, the Oregon legislature has not been able to pass the transportation bill. So we're watching a lot of movement on the chessboard right now. So we're just going to have to figure out how this other plays out.
Yeah.
Because so much is now based on the feds.
Yeah. I just want to frame the idea that, is that a false dichotomy that has been presented over and over again?
Yes.
It's not just exclusive to Oregon. It's not just exclusive to Portland. When this federal money flows in, they have this obsession with throughput and level of service. And there is this idea that the only way to get it is to expand lanes. But when you actually look at those metrics and you look at what induced demand causes, just because you made a bigger glass, people end up just pouring more margarita in it. I mean, it's as soon as you add lanes, they fill up. And there doesn't seem to be any willingness on the part of the funding bodies to think about what everybody in the community is saying, which is this is a problem, and we'd like to come up with creative solutions. And you're the one saying that the only way that we can do this is to put a cap and add lanes.
When you're flush, and they were for so long, and America had an obsession with highways.
Oh, we love them.
And who is it that they were really catering to? I heard it earlier. The fact that it could be stopped in Southeast. When's the last time they were fighting freeways in Southwest? When? That's the point, and that's often lost, is that we can keep on recreating the mess that we've recreated because you people who don't count, even though you have your hands up, this is the way America has done freeway systems that have punished some to the benefit of others.
I feel like I didn't quite get if you close your eyes and picture Albina, or the Albina of your dreams, what that looks like for you.
Well, it's going to have multi-generational housing. It's going to be the entertainment center again. It is going to be economic opportunities and entrepreneurship, which we had before and continue. It's going to be a place that you want to come and hang out in like many of your folks did before. And you can say it out loud to others that I was hanging out there because it's going to be community by the water. And we're even working on how to change that desert-looking scene that is the parking lot for the Trailblazers, and how often is there something going on in that entertainment district in a year. So your ideas, your critiques about what the future could look like, Albina is leading as an urban area that is not about removal, but restoration and retooling.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
That was WGBH's Ian Coss in conversation with OPB's Lillian Kerbeck, live at Portland's Literary Arts Bookstore. Check out The Big Dig at WGBH.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening to our podcast, The Evergreen from OPB. This episode was produced by Lillian Kerbeck and Sage Van Wing. Our technical director is Stephen Cray. Lillian Silva engineered this episode. The OPB podcast team also includes Mia Estrada and Julie Sabatier. And a huge thank you to Ian Coss from The Big Dig for hosting the live event, and to Literary Arts for letting us use their space for the conversation. Music in this episode comes from Audio Network. And if you ever have a question for us, please reach out. Send us an email at theevergreen@opb.org. I'm Jen Chavez. Catch you later.